Well, hey everybody, welcome back.
Hello, everyone.
So we are celebrating a holiday, as you can tell by the hearts around this guy here. Well, someday we're gonna have to come up with a name for this guy, I think.
Yeah, maybe you guys need to let us know
Yeah,
what he should be named.
yeah.
We
Make
need
that name him
ideas. Yep.
or her. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Name this. But anyway, so we are celebrating Valentine's Day, but actually we are calling it Valoween.
Halloween.
So, you know, I don't really know a ton about this holiday or just this new version of this holiday. So, what we decided to do was bring back an old friend of the show.
Yes, we have.
We have Rissa Miller. And Rissa Miller has been on a couple of times, and we love having her on. But, she's got a much better accounting of what Valoween is than I do. Do you know much about it?
I do not. It's a recent thing. So
Yeah.
she's going to explain all that to us and tell us some stories.
Yeah, we can't wait. So, what do you say we bring her on?
Let's talk to her.
Sounds good. Hey, Rissa.
Hello.
Hey.
It's so awesome to have you back on.
Well, thanks for having me back again. I always enjoy being a guest on Gen X Paranormal.
Yay.
We love having you.
Here, it's awesome. And you've kind of become which is great, but you've kind of become the holiday holiday guest, which is perfect for us. It's nice to have it's always nice to have somebody to come on that can kind of share in some of that fun. So pretty excited.
Well, it's a pleasure, and folklore, which kind of covers holidays, is definitely one of my areas of expertise. So I'm happy to be here, and today we're going to talk, I guess about Valentine's Day with all those hearts behind you.
I know.
Yeah.
You got some love for that ghost back there, I see.
Yeah. We try to be festive. If you remember for the holiday one, the Christmas one, we try to decorate him for the holidays, make him feel like he's part of the show, not just our mascot.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, everybody should have a little more love for ghosts because, that's what we're going to be talking about today, right? Like ghosts and
that's
love
awesome.
stories.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I can't wait to hear what she has to tell us. Yeah.
Yeah. If you could tell us a little bit about kind of as to start with, like the origin of the holiday that we're kind of talking about. We're super excited about that.
So, this really interesting thing is that the true origin of Valentine's Day is actually unknown. Historians definitely are not sure, and it could have come from multiple different places, but really nobody knows. So the name Valentine historically, especially in Roman times, was not unusual. It was a pretty common name. And there are lots of stories associated with people named Valentine, and there's even more than one Saint Valentine. So that makes it a little difficult to pin down the origin. Now, rewinding a tiny bit, some people like to say that Valentine's Day's pagan origin is Lupercalia. So maybe, but it's a holiday that celebrates fertility. It was a festival honoring Juno, the Roman goddess of marriage. But the thing is, a lot of historians aren't sure that they're actually really the same or that they can even be wedded together. That said, let's look at some stories about Saint Valentine. There was one really lovely story that one of the Saint Valentines restored sight to a blind girl, and later, legendarily, I don't know if this is true or not, sent her a letter, and it was signed "Your Valentine." So some people say that's maybe the history of the idea of Valentines, but there's a lot of Victorian stuff. Shocking, I know, for me to say that, right? Surprise, the Victorians were involved.
Of course.
So in the Victorian time, it did become more common to think about things like lovebirds. In early spring is when birds start to fly back after winter, and that's when the phrase lovebirds became common. And then you also have the idea of offering chocolates or candy. Well, there weren't even chocolates and candy available through most of history. Sugar was a tropical crop, and it wasn't until industrialization that sugar was widely available.
Right.
Chocolate as well. Chocolate is from South America. It's not like they had it everywhere. Right. So during the time of the Industrial Revolution is when stuff like that became more common, as well as paper greeting cards. So The idea of sending a greeting card wasn't even really a thing before the Victorian era. Maybe occasionally, people sent letters. Definitely love letters were a thing for, as long as people could write. But the idea of a Valentine came later. And Cupid was Greek, not Roman. So,
Yeah.
It all meshed together.
Yeah. Cupid was known to Greeks as Eros, and he was the handsome god of love. So all of these things have sort of mashed up together to give us the holiday we think of now as Valentine's Day. It's definitely a mashup holiday, though, and its modern manifestation is from all over the place.
Right.
I really like the newer versions, like Galentine's Day. It does trace its history literally back to Parks and Rec season 2, episode 16.
I was just about to mention
when
that.
Amy Poehler has the ladies celebrating ladies brunch and gifts and toasts, and I love that. It's a lot of fun. And then, of course, today we're going to get spooky and we're going to talk about Valoween. So Valoween is the mashup between Valentine's Day and Halloween.
Yes.
I cannot find a true origin. I think this started on social media.
Okay.
Yep.
That is my official opinion on the subject. I cannot verify that for you. It doesn't seem to exist before about 10 years ago anywhere. It does seem to exist for quite a while on Pinterest.
Okay.
That seems to be where historically I can find the oldest posts about it.
Wow.
I still can't.
Cool though. Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. But also there's some debate apparently whether Valoween is February the 13th, which is also Galentine's Day according to Parks and Rec, or is it the same day as Valentine's Day, February 14th? You know what? Go for whatever works for you. I think.
I mean, why not? I mean, if it's something created out of Pinterest and it's still relatively new,
right?
Hey,
and maybe it just hasn't really found its way yet.
Right.
Yeah.
I did want to share that I got this cute spooky Valentine. I bought it locally to me in Pennsylvania at a place called the Dark Parlor, where the house artist Lauren Ray draws spooky greeting cards, and she has made a whole series of these spooky Valoween greetings. So mine has a centipede, and it says, "I want to be your love bug." And I just thought it was too cute. I had to get a spooky Valentine since I knew I'd be chatting with you all.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. What a great piece of art, too.
Isn't it lovely?
Oh,
yeah.
Man, no kidding.
But it's not, unless you're on Pinterest, I suppose, it's not super easy or Etsy to find a spooky Valentine. And that's one way that I knew it wasn't actually going to go back to the Victorians or something like that.
Right.
They just weren't there. It just was not there to be found. So
that's awesome.
For those looking, you can always check out Etsy for all of your Valoween needs.
Yeah. Nice plug for Etsy.
Yep.
Right?
I love it, so I'm good with that.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's the small makers and artists that do these things first. And then large companies catch on because they're like, oh, this is a viable thing and we can sell it.
Exactly.
So, but that's how these things always begin.
Yep. That's fun though, too, because, it's like kind of like the old days when we were younger. It was like you had these little artist communities and everything. And while that still exists in a lot of places, it's harder to kind of nail down. Now there's a much bigger community that's capable of doing that. So that's pretty cool.
It is.
Well, you can get things farther, like from where we're at, there's not a lot of that to access. So, definitely getting on there. You can get it from even, across the ocean.
Absolutely.
Which I have done.
Yes, you have.
Yeah, I also have done. That's where my Krampus cookie cutter came from, was somewhere in Europe. Yeah.
That's cool.
That one was
not
cool.
available at my local Michael's.
No, I wouldn't think that'd be the case. Or the I can't remember which one it was that did the poop thing. I'm sure that's not available at your local.
Well, that is a Spanish tradition, so
that's
you
right.
Probably have to refer to Spanish makers to get those. Yeah, it's the Tio de Nadal, your favorite new Christmas story, right?
Gosh, it makes me laugh still.
Well, what's funny with us, my uncle contacted us after he watched that episode. He said, "You better not walk into his house and do anything."
Yeah, he did actually say that's pretty hilarious.
It was a total joke, but it was really funny.
Oh, I love it. Well, I'm so glad that he's able to embrace these cultural traditions.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's move on to
Let's get into some spooky love stories.
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's go for it.
The first one I have for you is kind of a Romeo and Juliet story. And some of these are going to be sad. I'm going to give you a heads up.
Okay.
The first one, we're going to go to New York State, north of Manhattan Island, even a little north of Sleepy Hollow. And we're going way back in time to when the villages there were Mohican. And there was a chief, and his village was, I might say this word badly. I don't know the Mohican language. So if anybody who is listening is an expert in native languages, please forgive me. I'm trying. I'm going to say that it was Patcoyote was how the village was pronounced. So this chief had a really special daughter. She was really brilliant. She was really lovely, and everybody wanted to marry her. But one day, walking in the woods, she met a very special man. Unfortunately, he was the son of an enemy tribe. And much like in Romeo and Juliet, that does never, ever stop people from falling in love just because their families are rivals. And even though many men tried to win her heart, she really, really wanted this one. Now, the chief of the Mohicans was a stubborn guy. He was not going to listen to his daughter's pleas to meet this young man. And because he was from a rival tribe, the young man couldn't exactly go ask for her in marriage. And his tribe couldn't win against the Mohicans. They were sort of legendary warriors. And, they played huge roles in the American Revolution and other wars that came. So they decided instead to run away in the night, basically to elope, kind of just like Romeo and Juliet, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, this is where the story changes from Romeo and Juliet. Their ancestors became incredibly angry. This is a legend. And they sent a storm. And it was a big storm. Lightning, thunder. The sky just opens up. And it's such a deluge that it starts to become a mudslide in the forest where they are. And there's a huge crash, blinding lightning, and then a boulder is set loose and it begins rolling down a hill. It hits them, carries them in the mudslide down to a rushing stream, and unfortunately they both die and their bodies are, according to the legend, trapped under the boulder. The boulder is still there. It is in Clavrock Creek, and the story is that it is a monument to them. That the enemy tribes, if they would have just cooperated, both of them would have lived, and both of their tribes would have lived on through them. And they say that right before a storm, you can still hear her crying. They call it Spook Rock, and the Greenport Historical Society actually set up a plaque in 2016 to memorialize what happened to the two tribes at that time.
Wow.
It's sad.
It is really sad. There's something about, I don't know what it is. If you see a ghost and, you see the actual, if you see an apparition or not, but something about kids laughing or women crying scare the what out of me if that ever comes down to it. I don't know what it is, just the thought of that. It's kind of haunting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like this is one of those stories that, even though it's quite tragic and there was loss of life, that there's a valuable lesson.
Sure.
Cooperation always beats trying to run away, and it isn't always going to be feasible. I'm sure that their parents would have probably never been into the idea, but then at the end it would have been so much better than what happened.
Losing both of them.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it is absolutely a great message in itself. And right kind of out of the page of Romeo and Juliet, but if you have two battling entities, but yet, they can't find common ground, tragedy happens. So that makes perfect sense.
It sounds similar. When you started the story, I thought it was this other thing that I had heard, and I don't know where it is. I just remember something about a story about a Native American woman, and I thought it was similar to that, but it has to do with a waterfall somewhere.
Interesting. But I don't think I know that story.
Yeah, and I cannot remember where it was. I heard it a long, long time ago, but it might be out west somewhere.
We'll save it for next Valoween.
Yeah. I'll have
There
to
you
look
go.
it up later and let you know. But I know I've heard that story somewhere.
Yeah.
But once again, they can't prove that they know for sure who this person was. It's just like, like a legend.
Yeah.
Yeah. We know there are definitely a lot of stories of natives, male or female, that fell in love with colonists, and it was just not approved by either side.
Right.
And
Right.
once again, here we are in a space where it's like, if people cooperate, love always wins. But
Yeah.
so many of those stories are tragic. People either had to run away and become isolated, which, historically was a really big deal, because if you didn't have the support of a village, it was a lot harder to cut it.
Right.
And,
yeah.
if you didn't have a community, either people were in that scenario, or often one or both partners died.
Right.
And it is tragic. It is absolutely a sad and difficult lesson that I feel like humanity's still working on.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So moving a little further south into Pennsylvania, my next story is at a place called the Akamak Inn. Now, the Akamak is a native Algonquin word meaning across the water. And the inn is a real place. You can drive by it right now. It is for sale. If you have $1.5 million, you could purchase it. On a whim, whatever.
Why not?
My birthday's coming up.
Sure. I think our checkbook's sitting
if
around
you
here
want a
somewhere.
haunted restaurant of your own.
That would be awesome.
I'd love to buy something like that. That'd be really awesome.
That would be neat.
Yep. So the Akamak is a real place. I have dined there in my life. Now, they have been closed since, I believe, 2019. But as a child, I ate there. My parents have been there several times. And it was a really lovely place in its day. I'm not sure what happened or why it closed. I don't think it was because of the hauntings. The hauntings there are actually kind of beloved in their community, much like the Akamak itself. This is the place where the first steamboat in America was launched. It is the landing place on the Susquehanna River where the Marquis de Lafayette came in 1778 and signed the treaty where France joined the United States against the British. So it's a place with lots of very cool history.
Yeah, no kidding.
But embedded in that history is the ghost story.
Dun, dun, dun.
So in 1874, the Coyle family, John and Mary, owned the Akamak Inn. And they had a son named Johnny Jr. So he was a really excellent sailor and a good boatsman. And since they lived on a river, that made him a very fine prospect. They owned the ferry station and the inn. Unfortunately, he also had a really bad temper. And he was kind of unpredictable. His behavior was challenging. If we were looking at him today, we might say that he had some emotional health issues to work on. But they didn't have that kind of language in 1874.
Right.
So they employed a young woman who was an orphan from Chambersburg named Emily Myers. Now, Emily would have been doing very well to marry Johnny, because he was completely smitten with her, since she had no family and she had no dowry. However, she knew him. And she was like, nope. He asked her repeatedly to marry him. And she always said no, and just continued to do her work. So on May 30th in 1882, he asked her one more time, and she said no. And Johnny decided that if he couldn't have Emily, nobody else was going to have her either. And he shot and killed her in their barn.
Oh my gosh.
So then he was like, this isn't good. So he sort of turned the gun on himself, but he wasn't successful in killing himself. He injured himself, and then he ran off into the woods. And 10 days later, he was caught and charged with her murder.
Wow.
Yeah. He was found guilty of her murder, but because his family was so prominent, he was able to get a retrial. So they took him to a different part of Pennsylvania, and he got his retrial, and that jury also said, oh yeah, this guy is super guilty of murdering Emily Myers.
Yeah.
He was hanged, he died, and they tried to bury him in their hometown of Marietta, Pennsylvania, and the city refused. They're like, we don't want this murderer here.
Wow.
So they brought him back to the Akamak. He was buried there, and his tombstone and burial plot can still be seen there today. It is only 50 feet away from the building. Now, where Emily Myers is buried is kind of a mystery. Some people believe she's buried there, but she had no family to bury her, so it's not like they would have taken her home. That was her home. So it's very likely that she indeed could be buried at the Akamak Inn.
Wow, that is wild.
Isn't it? Now, for decades, patrons of the Akamak reported seeing both Emily and Johnny as apparitions at the inn. So Emily is always sad. Emily is always crying. She will frequently show up as a full-bodied apparition, pleading for help, weeping into her hands. I have not personally seen her, but my understanding from witnesses that she shows up so fully formed that one time a staff member was closing down for the night, thought there was a woman sitting on the porch, called the police. The cops get there, and it's the ghost of Emily crying.
Wow. So the cops actually saw that?
Apparently a lot of people have seen her.
Wow.
Now, Johnny does not show up as a full-bodied apparition, but even in death, he seems to have kept his bad temper. Broken dishes, slammed doors, all kinds of other encounters with him make people very aware that there are two totally different apparitions at the Akamak. Now, can you imagine not wanting to marry someone?
I was just about to say that. Hopefully that she's not aware that he's there, because that's awful.
Not wanting to marry someone and getting stuck with them literally forever.
Exactly. And that's why she's crying.
Yeah.
And he, of course, is once an a-hole, always an a-hole. So he's just going to,
Well, that's what they say. Who did we talk to about that? I don't remember.
I'm not sure who it was.
But they said that they will keep that same
I think the term
personality.
Yeah, the term was, I won't say it here because it's a little colorful, but once an a-hole, always an a-hole.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. And there are other ghosts that come and go from the Akamak. There's a cat ghost, which sounds super fun to me.
Nice.
And there's the ghost of a Confederate soldier who was a spy. But Emily and Johnny still show up. I don't know that anybody's really been in the building all that much since it's been put up for sale. I guess maybe the current owner and the realtor. But I keep thinking to myself, at least when it was a busy and popular restaurant, the two of them had other people to interact with the staff and patrons. And now it's kind of like just them.
Can you imagine how increased of activity there's probably going on in there right now?
Well, especially when they sell it and people take over, they're probably going to renovate, and that's usually
usually when things get knocked loose for sure.
Yes.
Well, let's put a pin on that one and hopefully we come back to that one whenever it gets there.
Yeah.
Man.
Oh, yeah. And it's a beautiful property. It's right on the Susquehanna River. So hopefully somebody wants to reopen it. And hopefully Emily and Johnny are hopeful.
Yeah. And hey,
when
audience, for sure. And audience, we're going to put up pictures and stuff of it. So if you got 1.5 million, right? Is that what it was?
That's right.
Yeah, 1.5 million. That's nothing. Just... I don't know, just take a second job or something, or make that your job. You never know.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. You never know who's listening. Maybe somebody's looking for a historic investment property.
If I had 1.5, believe me, I'd actually do it. That'd be something that would be really cool to renovate and have, and even bring this story, as part of it. Create,
into a bed and breakfast or something.
Oh, I don't know, something.
Yeah, it's had a lot of different lives. It's been an inn with sleeping quarters. It's been an inn that was just a restaurant. So, and it is. When you look at the pictures, it's a great old building. It's a gorgeous site.
That's really cool.
That's awesome. And those listening on the podcast, look it up. It's pretty cool.
So now we're going to move south again into Maryland, and we're going to go to a town called Ellicott City. Now, Ellicott City holds a special place in my heart. It is where I got started as a ghost tour guide many years ago. I have worked there for a long time for Maryland History Tours, and that's where this story comes from. So it is the ghost of the Judge's Bench. So the Judge's Bench is a building. It dates back to the late 1800s, and it is made of a very particular kind of stone that's common in Ellicott City. It's a composite stone that has quartz crystal in it. And the story goes that that's why Ellicott City is so very haunted, is that the quartz crystal composite sort of holds and binds spirits down in the city.
Right.
Ellicott also sits at the crux of two rivers.
Okay.
So you have that energy as well, holding and binding your ghosts down.
Yeah. That seems to be a pretty common
thing.
Yes.
Even from most paranormal researchers, quartz just seems to have that capability to lock down memory and limestone. And then you have running water increases activity. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that's talk about a recipe.
Even better, in Ellicott City, it's down in a valley, and then they put a electric grid over the top. So it's almost like a box. It's like a ghost. I know ghost box is a real thing, but in the way of describing a piece of land, it's like a land ghost box.
An opposite Faraday cage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's everything's locked into that one area like that. That's pretty wild.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I have another story of a forbidden love. And the judge's bench, like I said, dates back to the 1800s. It's made on a foundation of this composite stone. It's been a residence, it's been a grocery store, it's been a flooring store. Right now, it's a really popular tavern. It was named the judge's bench because right up the hill, they used to have the courthouse. And the judges would go down there afterwards and get their bourbon. And it's a town favorite that's still popular for having really excellent bourbon. I think I even sent you maybe a picture of like one of their really famous bourbon flights.
Yeah,
we'll put it up.
Yeah, we'll put it up there for sure.
Yep,
and I do
that's
love
still
bourbon.
a thing. They've still got it. So in the 1940 and 1970, it was called Burger's Grocery, and it was kind of a mom and pop local grocery store before we had things, like Kroger and huge complex grocery stores like that.
Right.
Back when, you went to a mom and pop store to get your food.
Yep.
And the couple who owned the store started their business right after they were married. They lived upstairs from the store, and they had a daughter. Her name was Mary. Now, nowadays, Ellicott City's a sort of upscale tourist destination. But back then, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, it had a reputation as a different kind of town. It was a town that had survived the Prohibition and come out just partying and happy and ready to go. And it was a town known for basically wine, women, and song. In fact, it was such a reputable town that even the local Fort Meade military the soldiers there were told they were not allowed to go to Ellicott City because it was so wild, which is probably like, you should go to Ellicott City.
Yeah, that means every soldier was there.
Yeah, pretty much. So, that said, they didn't want Mary to date any boys from town. They wanted to find her an honorable young man to be her husband. And by the time she was 19, of course, she met and fell in love with a boy who was from Ellicott City. And her parents were like, yeah, no, you can't marry him. We don't even want to meet him. And she couldn't see any way this was going to work out in her favor. So unfortunately, in 1962, Mary hanged herself on the third floor of the building.
That's sad.
But she never left. She is a very popular ghost about town. The judge's bench, folks who work there, the current owners. The current owners, when they took over, were non-believers, and they have since changed their minds decided that they are believers. And, there's a sort of a happy addendum to the story. In the late 90s, there was a young man who was going to college in the area, and he worked at the judge's bench as like his, college job as a bartender. He could see Mary and he could interact with her. And the story goes that all the years he was in school, and then he even stayed after because he and Mary really developed a great friendship. And he didn't want to leave and move on to his professional career because he had to leave her behind. Eventually he did. He couldn't stay forever. But the guess to me, the happy part is at least she finally got to have not only someone who could see and interact with her as a ghost, but she got to have her Ellicott City boy and at least have that relationship with someone even after her death.
Oh, wow.
It's sad.
Yeah, it's sad.
It is a tragic story. It is it was yet another story.
Yeah.
It's very sad. But
yeah.
I do love that she at least she does have a lot of interaction. People go in there just to look for her. Apparently she's very playful. She's still a 19-year-old. You know, she's stayed forever. I know several people who've had interactions with her in the bathrooms and in the different parts of the pub. But she's a very busy and active
usually
spirit.
Playful?
Yes, she's always kind of upbeat.
Okay.
She's like I said, she's a 19-year-old. She will always be there. In that,
so
in
did
that
they
age.
see her and hear her, or is it she's just moving stuff around?
All of the above.
All of it. That's cool.
All of the above.
Yep. So she's not what some people consider residual. She's more
not residual. Ellicott City has lots of residual stories, but I chose Mary specifically because she is a very active, interactive.
That's awesome.
Those are the best.
Yeah, they are the best. The residuals are good because, you know, they're just as paranormal, but...
And they tell a story.
And they tell a story, but the active are always
But when you get a response from them, it's different.
Different is a good word.
Positive or negative.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to come all the way over to Missouri, to Springfield, to Phelps Grove Park for another story of lost love.
Well, that's a familiar
It is.
place.
Yeah. So since the two of you know Phelps Grove Park, any chance that you've seen any ghostly activity there yourselves?
No, and you know, I went to college in Springfield, and that was the big story, you know, at Phelps Grove Park. You need to go there. So we were there all the time, but I never saw anything. And most of the people don't see anything. It's just mostly like a legend.
Yeah, I think it could be a legend. You know, I dug around a lot on this one. I really wanted to find names, and I couldn't find them. It doesn't mean they're not there.
Right.
It just means, you know, without being in Springfield, Missouri and going to your newspaper archives, I could not find them online.
Right.
Well, I think even having gone there myself, you know, everybody talks about it, but I don't even know if I remember, because I know you'll get into it. Well, there's a bridge involved.
There is.
But there's not, I'm not 100% sure where the bridge would have been, because there's a couple of places where it could have
It still exists, and there's a picture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that was off.
You just forget where it is.
Yeah, I did.
Well, there are 3 entrances to the park, says the woman who's never been there, but looked at maps.
That's what confused me. There are 3 entrances.
There are 3 entrances to the park. So Phelps Grove Park actually dates back to 1914. It was at the south side of the Springfield city limits back then, and it was part of the John and Mary Phelps homestead at the time. They're kind of considered the founding mother and father of the city. He was a Missouri congressman. He was the governor of Missouri, and his wife Mary was involved with educating orphans after the Civil War. Yep. Today, it is a 31-acre park, and it's not as big as it used to be. They've sort of trimmed it away over time, but it does still have the McGregor wading pool, Memorial Rose Garden, a baseball field, walking trails, tennis courts, and lots of pavilions, and the Fieldstone Bridge. Now, I love bridge stories because the thing about bridges is that they're liminal space. Meaning a bridge is kind of, you know, that connection between this side, and in the middle, you're kind of floating. It's the perfect place for ghost stories, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Almost all bridges seem to have a cryptid or a ghost story or something.
Yeah.
So,
especially
this
a la Mothman, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of Mothman, personally. But, I don't know. I don't think that I would say Mothman is my favorite cryptid, but he's up there. He's up there. Probably top 5. Top 5.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Ours too. Yeah.
Yeah, top 5. I'm sitting here like, what is my favorite cryptid? I don't know. There's a lot of.
I don't know. They interchange for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, let me get back to the park.
Yeah, sorry. So, you get lost a long time with that. But yeah, you're right. Let's head back.
So the interesting thing about this particular Fieldstone Bridge is that it's not going over a body of water. It's arching over a drainage canal. So maybe it's possible, Logan, that you just overlooked it.
I probably did.
You know,
you've seen it. He just forgets. Because it's not a huge bridge.
Okay. Makes sense then.
So the story would date back to pre-1950s. And in the 1950s is when more and more people were able to afford cars because they were starting to be mass produced. manufactured in factories. Before that, cars were only for the very, very rich. This is a horse-drawn carriage story at its core, at its beginning. I did find modern takes on this that say it was in the 70s or 80s and a car flipped, but there's a lot older stuff on it on a carriage. So I'm going to place the origin of this pre-1950. On their wedding night, a couple's crossing the bridge in their horse-drawn carriage. Something spooks the horse. The carriage tips over, which happened a lot when horses spooked, especially if they reared up. And the carriage tipped over the railing of the bridge. The way the carriage landed, it instantly killed the couple. And the story is that people still see the woman in her wedding gown walking under and around the bridge.
Yep.
This is another story of super tragic loss. They call her the bride of the bridge or the bride under the bridge. There's another story that the horse was frightened by robbers. Now, we'll learn here very shortly, not in our next story, but the one after that, that highwaymen and robbers were really common historically. But so that's definitely a possibility of what could have spooked someone out for a wedding night carriage ride.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and that's definitely sorry. I mean, go ahead. I'm gonna catch you off mid-sentence.
I was going to say, if I were a robber and I saw somebody in all their wedding finery, I'd be like, I'm taking the bride's jewelry.
Yeah.
That's a thing that definitely could have happened.
Yeah, for sure. But it's interesting because I've only heard the horse-drawn carriage. I haven't heard the vehicle one.
No, I mean, mostly it just centers around, they say the lady in white.
Yeah, that's what they call her, is lady in white. And to this day, it's still a big thing. It's not like it's gone away. It's still a very active, if they want to say it's a legend or whether or not it is or not, but it is still very active today. And I still think people even go there and try to do like paranormal research in that area too. So
I did read that as well. That right around that bridge, they do detect EMF and EVPs and things like that. Which is why I really wanted to find newspaper stories about what happened. And it just was hard to find things pre-1950 to dig on at a distance. So, if I ever get over there, I'm going to look it up.
Yeah.
Hey, let us know. We'll meet you.
Sounds good.
These legends always start from something.
Yeah, they do.
They do. And there's always that origin story, which, is part of what I love to find. I love to find the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also nice to call a ghost by their name.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Get more response.
Yeah, because you don't want to go, hey, lady in white, do something.
Yeah.
But...
And honestly, I even like the bride under the bridge better because lady in white has become a trope. And I'm not saying that there aren't ladies in white. There certainly are. But it's kind of like, hey, you know?
Yeah,
exactly. That's what they call every lady that's anywhere.
Some white gossamer gown, and
there's the lady in white, the lady in gray, the lady in red, and these are all super common tropes now in the ghost world. And I'm kind of like, well, who is the lady in white? Because they're not all the same. Who is this lady in gray?
I have a name, people.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And even if even the bride under the bridge is a little more defining.
We'll go with that. Bride under the bridge. We'll just call it right now from this moment forward.
Yeah, there you go.
Bride
we'll
under
have
the
to
bridge.
spread news.
Yep. So now we're going to head to New Orleans. What is a series of ghost stories without one from New Orleans, right?
Absolutely.
You gotta love a New Orleans ghost story, especially when it starts at the first legal brothel.
Okay.
So the year is 1821. And we're going to be heading to the Dauphine Orleans Hotel. It is still a real place. You can absolutely go there and get a drink in the bar or spend the night if you feel up to it, I suppose. And I have indeed been there. I did not spend the night, but I also didn't have any otherworldly experiences. And disappointing, but true. This particular hotel is also known for its signature cocktail, which is called a Pym Cup. Now, most people are going to be like, Rissa, that's from England. Well, New Orleans has its own variation on the Pym's Cup. Yes, it did start in England. It came from London in the 1840s. 100 years later, it landed in the French Quarter, and they changed it. They added lemonade, 7-Up, which was a real thing in 1940, because 7-Up started in the 1920s, and cucumber. So it is considered to be a refreshing cocktail. It's gin-based, and if you go to this particular place, it's supposedly one of the best spots in New Orleans to get one. And maybe you can sip on it and look for Millie Bailey. So May and Millie Bailey were Irish sisters. They immigrated with their parents in the 1850s. And unfortunately, their parents died. So they had to sort of rapidly come up with a plan B. And May decided the best way to make a lot of money was to open a brothel. And to employ other women as sex workers. So this is a lot to take in, and historically this was definitely a way a lot of women chose to go, because this was a more viable living than most things that unmarried women could do. And I'm sure that maybe somebody will have something to say about that, but historically this is unfortunately a reality.
History is history.
You were never going to make a living as a maid or a cook the way you could as a sex worker.
Right.
End of story.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also in the 1800s, if you didn't have a husband, well, that was a whole other thing. Now, Millie was not as excited to open a brothel as her sister, but she kind of had to help anyway. And she wanted to do something different. And so as Storyville became a very famous part of New Orleans, which is, it's a tourist district now, but back then it was also known as, I think, the Scarlet Thread, because that was the part of New Orleans, Storyville, that was where all the brothels were.
Okay.
This was legally sanctioned prostitution, I'm going to let you know. It was a true red light district. They had the red lanterns hung out in the windows, and sometimes the girls were in the windows. Like live girls in the windows. And May Bailey's place was probably one of the most famous brothels in the history of New Orleans.
Wow.
So if Millie, her sister, wasn't crazy about it, well, she got drag kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So the Dauphine Orleans Hotel is still there. It's really well known because it is where John Audubon painted the birds of America.
Really?
I mean, if you're going to paint somewhere, might as well be there.
We went there on tour. When
Did you go there?
We have walked past.
Yeah,
only been to New Orleans.
Yeah.
Possibly.
I feel like I didn't mean to cut you off, but I
the name is
sounds
familiar.
really familiar. Yeah.
Well, if you go there today, the portraits by the Storyville photographer E.J. Balak show different madams that worked in New Orleans over time, and some of the girls. There is still a framed copy of the original first brothel license in New Orleans, which was issued to May Bailey on display in the bar, and they still have red lights burning in the courtyard. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, there are a number of famous ghosts there. There are Civil War ghosts because it also served as a Civil War hospital. There is a girl named Jewel who was one of the sex workers, and they say that you can still see her dancing in the windows sometimes, and that she has a cat companion that shows up as an orb. But Millie Bailey turned out to be the most famous ghost, unfortunately. They call her the Lost Bride of the Dauphine Orleans Hotel, and she did in fact find a man to marry. And there's two ways the story can go. Some people say he was a military officer with a gambling habit. Others say his actual profession was gambling. Either way, this doesn't sound good, right?
No, right, it's gambling.
It's already a recipe for disaster.
Yes. Yeah. So the very day of their wedding, he died due to a huge gambling debt.
Oh my gosh.
And some tellings of the stories say that he was killed, which, I mean, historically, if you had a big gambling debt, that's something that happened. Others say that he ran this huge gambling debt up and he didn't want her to marry into it, so that he killed himself so that they would not marry. Either way, this is like the worst setup ever for being left at the altar.
Yeah, no
right,
kidding.
no kidding.
Yeah.
Jeez.
The legend goes that Millie lost touch with reality. She became very, very ill, and that she died extremely young. Her spirit still wanders in her wedding dress and veil, which her fiancé never got to see her wear. And witnesses report that she goes to be as if she's expecting him. She keeps watching out the window. She's pacing anxiously, like, where is he? Where is he? And they say that whenever she walks by, there's like a gust of cold air. Even in the heat of the New Orleans summer, when Millie walks by, the place goes cold. So Could she be a
Maybe
residual?
there too.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
But
Definitely.
I didn't see any accounts of people interacting with her.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a tragic love story yet again.
Yeah.
It does sound residual.
Yeah, it does sound residual, but still, I mean, that's with New Orleans having so much paranormal, I guess,
Activity.
incidences and activity.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I could see where, there would be several entities there, but yeah, I would imagine she's got to be residual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I guess that's one place to go if you need to cool off.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right?
Because it can get hot in New Orleans. My
You can
goodness.
sip a Pim's cup and get cooled off by the ghosts.
Yep. There you go.
Call it a date. We'll head there.
That sounds like a great Valoween activity, really.
Yeah, actually,
no
it's really
kidding.
good. So if you're in New Orleans and you want to do some celebration on this wonderful holiday, head on down there, get yourself a drink, and
Maybe
report
Ellie's
back to
place
us
is
what you
still
see.
there. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's really cool, though.
that's awesome.
Yeah. Another place full of fascinating history.
Yeah.
For
So
sure.
we're going to stay in the South, and we're going to head to the old Charleston jail in South Carolina for a story of a
yeah.
couple that is together forever. The year is 1891. Lavinia, I'm going to say her name wrong every time. Lavinia and John Fisher lived in Charleston, South Carolina. This was a major port city at the time. I mean, it's still a port city, of course.
Yep.
But back then, commerce coming in through the ocean was a huge part of the economy. Now, inns in that part of the country were named by their mile. So there was like a 4-mile house, 6-mile house, 8-mile house, depending on how many miles out you were from the main town. The Fishers operated the 6-mile Wayfarer house, and it was kind of like a rest stop, a bar, and a place where you could sleep. Now, around this time, there had gotten to be word that there might be gambling taking place inside the inns, probably. Other kinds of extracurriculars, maybe the kind that May Bailey offered in New Orleans. And, things like that started to generate around the Charleston community. But there weren't really a lot of people willing to come forward as witnesses. Probably because the people traveling wanted those activities to continue.
Right.
And when the 6-mile Wayfarer house came up, the word was that Lavinia was so beautiful that people said she was enchanting and beguilingly beautiful. So that's pretty charming and a powerful way to convince people that you're right, I'm sure. So there got to be issues with what historically they were called highwaymen. Basically, like I mentioned when we were talking about the Springfield story, these were people that robbed you on the road, especially in the days of a horse-drawn carriage. If you had a couple of dudes on horses that could run up besides a carriage, it was pretty easy to rob people. And unfortunately, that started happening outside of Charleston. Now, a mob got word that at the 5-mile house, right down the way from the Fishers, that's where the highwayman was. So this wild, crazed mob went and burned down the 5-mile house.
Wow.
It's not the best solution, but it's what they did. So
That's
then,
a bit,
what does that do?
yeah, I don't know.
I'm not sure what the good in that is either. But
Right.
Then they were like super excited, I suppose, and they went on down the road to the 6-mile Wayfarer house where the Fishers were. Now, at the 6-mile house, they could see the fire, smell the smoke, they heard the ruckus, they knew that things were not going well. And a lot of the folks sort of deserted the premises, but the Fishers, this is their house. They were like, we don't really want to go.
Right.
So they left reluctantly, and the mob left a watchman. Now, the next thing I'm going to tell you is the story of Lavinia Fisher is possibly the story of America's first female serial killer.
Wow.
Do you know this one? Now that I say
No,
it? No,
I do not.
Okay.
No.
So, the mob left this guy David at the house. The Fishers came back. The Fishers came back, and somehow David got away, ran back into Charleston, and he was like, it was never the 5-mile house people. These 6-mile Wayfarer house people are the villains. It is actually Lavinia Fisher. And her husband John's just like, okay, we'll do it. They said that Lavinia Fisher, this was his own testimony, that she violently laid hands upon him, choked him, boxed his head with a pan, broke glass over him, and somehow he still got away. And apparently, she also had whips and had men holding him down so that she could beat him.
Jeez.
Yeah. Right? So, eventually the authorities do catch up. And the sheriff comes out to the 6 Mile Wayfarer house. They surround the property. They have guns. But Lavinia and John just kind of like walk out. And they're like, okay, we give up. Now, here's where the story starts to get cloudier. They say that she had like a rest stop of horrors, kind of. That she had a basement full of places where she tortured people, and that she was giving oleander tea, which is a poisonous flower, to people to go to sleep, just killing them in their sleep and then robbing them and tossing their bodies. Historians cannot verify whether that is true or not. It could be that her legend has gotten bigger over time.
Right.
Yeah, that could be.
And you see that happen from time to time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, potentially, yeah.
And then there's, of course, the expected stories, that she was so beautiful that she could lure anybody in to her inn. Was she greedy and unscrupulous, robbing people? Yes, history says yes. Was she a murderer? Possibly. Was she like Bonnie and Clyde with her husband? We'll actually probably never know.
Right.
We'll never know. But
it also sounds very vampire-ish.
Yeah, it does sound. Well, Charleston is
lures them in with her beauty.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It is a fascinating story. I mean, if you just examine, the historical context and the fact that they had an inn, so that they were in a position of trust, and somewhere you want to go feel safe while you sleep and like you water your horse,
Yeah, you're extremely vulnerable at that point.
Yes.
So yeah, that is
be easier to do. I mean,
absolutely.
In that situation.
So
Sounds
they
like
were convicted of highway robbery, and they were condemned to be hanged in February of 1820. So when the day arrives, the Fishers go to their execution, and they say that John Fisher was extremely upset and pale and tremoring uncontrollably inside of the carriage, and that he was clinging to Lavinia and holding her close, and that they walked to the gallows arm in arm. And now, this sounds like a story too. I don't know. They say that he basically repented before he was hanged, but she refused to. They say that her exact words were, hang on here, I want to read them.
Okay.
I will have none of it. Save your words for others that want them. But if you have a message you want sent to hell, give it to me. I'll carry it there.
Wow. No regrets.
No kidding. Jeez.
No regrets. She she definitely seemed to embrace who she was, and they were both hanged, and they died on February 18th, 1820. Now, there's some mystery about what happened to her afterwards. Allegedly, they were both placed in a potter's field, which you probably know is a cemetery where the graves are not marked.
Right, a pauper cemetery or whatever they
or
call
a criminal cemetery.
Or criminal cemetery, yes.
The funny thing is, they say that somebody possibly kept her body. Her bones were confiscated. Now, is this an urban legend? We'll probably never know. But many people say that she still haunts the city of Charleston and the old jail because she wants her bones put back.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't exactly seem to lay down very easily, so
No.
she's trying to find her bones. That'd be the person I think would be definitely trying to do it.
Well, it feels like she drug him into all this too.
Yeah.
He was that scared, and
it does kind of feel that way when you read the more in-depth accounts of what was going on. She was definitely the leader.
Yeah, for sure.
But indeed, they were hanged together forever, except that she's the haunt.
He's like, I'll have none of it. I'm good. I'm out.
Yeah.
Thanks for the memories. We're gone.
And
is
she
the
was
Old
like,
Town Jail in Charleston? Is it down near the river?
We've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen it.
Yeah, we've seen it.
Oh yeah, they do tours. They have like just regular history tours and also of course spooky tours. She was the first woman hanged in South Carolina as a criminal. So it sounds like she was definitely a character
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would
Very
say so.
colorful. Let's say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's such a that town with its history and just again, kind of like New Orleans, has that same pedigree of just
that vibe about it.
Yeah, just wild stuff that's happened there.
It does. So I have one more story for you before we run too late. I want to tell you a happy together forever ghost story.
Oh, good. We'll end it on a positive note.
Yeah, I definitely planned it this way.
Awesome.
I had my most shocking story, and then I'm going to have my sweet happy ending.
Okay.
So in Florida, there is a place called the Don Cesar Hotel. And I have a friend who stayed there. And I asked her, I was like, what was your impression? And she's like, well, it was definitely haunted. She goes, just saying. And I was like, excellent. That's what I really wanted to hear you say when I asked your impression. So it's also called the Pink Palace. It is a huge pink hotel, surprising no one in Florida. And it was built to honor a lover. So it is at St. Pete's Beach, and it is a Moorish architecture style. There are other things like that in Florida, but the woman that it was built for was Spanish. So it was also built to honor her Spanish Mediterranean lineage. It is considered the most haunted hotel in northern Florida, and according to legend, it harbors a pair of star-crossed lovers. So Thomas Rowell was born in Massachusetts in the 1890s, and he was educated in England, in London. So he went to see an opera called Martinana. I'm not a huge expert on opera, so forgive me if I'm saying that incorrectly.
Nor us. So
yeah. Martinana is the opera, and that is also the name of the leading character. The male character was Don Cesar, the name of the hotel. He loved this opera so much, and the leading lady, the actress, oh my goodness, he was just smitten with her. This is the Spanish beauty. Her real name was Lucinda. He went to see this opera night after night, and he finally got to meet her. And of course, they fell in love. They used to meet after the curtain at a fountain in London, and they decided that at the end of the run of Martinana, they were going to run away together. I guess she mentioned this to her folks, and they were not too keen on the idea. And they were waiting at the curtain of the last opera performance, and they whisked her back to Spain. He tried and tried and tried to find Lucinda, and he was never able to find her again. He eventually married a woman named Mary. That marriage failed. He moved to Florida, decided to get into real estate, and then a few years later, he got a letter. It said, Thomas, my beloved, my father promised to deliver this message. This life is an intermediate, and I am not without pain. I will wait for you by our fountain. Our destiny is time. So she died. She died. But it gave him a vision. He was going to build the perfect place for them to spend eternity together. He bought 80 beautiful acres along the beach in Florida. He was 3 times over budget. The hotel today is worth more than $24 million. And he completely recreated the fountain from England exactly as it was. It is the centerpiece when you walk into the hotel. It is the first thing you see. And they say that this is where you see them most frequently together. He did stay forever in the hotel. He lived there the rest of his life, and he died there as well. When you see him, they say that he appears in his signature white suit and hat, and that he's accompanied by a beautiful dark-haired lady in historic clothing from what would look like, the turn of the last century. So she has long skirts, her skirts rustle, people hear her shoes clicking around the hotel to this day, and her skirts rustling. So they still walk around together. She evidently did find him at the Don Cesar Hotel. But lots of other very famous people have stayed there. Al Capone, Lou Gehrig, Franklin D. Roosevelt, F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda stayed there. Some people say that it was their last happy time together, F. Scott and Zelda. And then occasionally there is a residual of them dancing in the ballroom.
Oh,
yeah, because after that, she was institutionalized for her mental health challenges. And that was kind of their downfall then. Their lives sort of changed forever at that point. So the Don Cesar Hotel is now a hotel and spa, and it's still there. You can still visit it today. It's gone through a lot of iterations. It was also, interestingly enough, a World War II hospital. But it's had a lot of lives. It's a sort of a staple in Florida. And they say that even to this day, you can see James and Lucinda walking around together.
That's cool. Man, that is pretty gripping because, obviously they weren't together in this life, but right. I mean, he created this entire palace for her, basically.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
That is heartwarming. That's a lot better to end on.
I thought that was a lovely way to end. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I thank you so much for bringing these stories to us. It is always, of course, when you run a paranormal podcast show, there's always the really, really scary stuff. And we got plenty of that, and, all the cryptids and everything. But you tend to forget there's a very human element behind all of this. So when it comes to a holiday like this, where people obviously have, like, I'm married and my spouse does everything with me, literally everything with me.
Yes.
So, no, it's great. It's always nice to have this sort of story. But, yeah, it's awesome.
I think the ghost stories ultimately are reminders both of our history and our humanity. So, hauntings can be scary, and so can people. And hauntings can be
very true.
Hauntings can be beautiful, and so can people.
Absolutely. Well, I can't think of any other better way to end it than that. I mean, that's perfect. So
it's a perfect story.
Yeah. Rissa, thanks again for coming on, and we'll look forward to the next time we can find another wonderful holiday to celebrate.
I'm sure we'll come up with something. I love being a guest on your show, so thanks for having me again.
We love having you.
Yeah, we always enjoy your stories. So
all right. We'll see you.
Take care. Happy Valoween.
Happy Valoween. Man, it's always great having her on, isn't it?
I know. I love having her on. That was fun.
Yeah, she's always a blast. She has got to be one of the best storytellers out there.
Honestly, she's so knowledgeable, and yeah,
she's always so much
fun. To go to. She actually is a tour guide.
Yeah.
So I would love to actually go be a part of that crowd and listen to her.
Yeah, Rissa, we may head out your way. But again, no, seriously, thank you, Rissa, for showing us or telling us these stories. Some of them were a bit sad, sure, but it goes with the holiday.
Yeah, but when they're ghost stories, they got to be a little sad because that means they're not here anymore.
That's a good point. I guess I kind of showed me on that one, but well, it was a good episode. We've had some fun. We've had some really good episodes of recent. Today was no different. Gosh, thank you so much for all the growth lately, guys. It's been great. We always say it on our show, but we do have a Facebook, Generation X Paranormal Podcast. Please, please, please follow us there. If you're listening on the podcast, please follow us there as well. And of course on YouTube. I always feel like you see this on every YouTube video, but please like and subscribe, and what is it, in the thumbs up button?
Ring the bell.
Ring the bell. Smash that thumbs up button. Anyway, honestly, we joke about it, but guys, if you could, that'd be great because that really does help us out quite a bit. But
if you're watching and want to be a guest on the show, just email us at info@gxparanormal.com and we can discuss doing that. If you're going, an author that's going to be releasing a book or whatever, you've had an experience that you would like to share. It doesn't have to necessarily be video. It can just be audio. Yeah, so if that's something that you're looking to do, just contact us. Yeah.
So on that note, get your Galentine's Day out the door. Celebrate your Galentine Day, or forgot how that even goes. Galentine's, right?
Galentine's.
What a great Parks and Rec episode. Or if you're single, or however you do it, however you're celebrating this holiday, grab some chocolates. Have a good one, and we'll catch you next week.
Happy Valoween.
Happy Valoween.
Thanks for tuning in to Generation X Paranormal. Remember, all editing is done in-house, and we're a self-funded podcast, so your support truly makes a difference. Like, subscribe, and follow us on all socials to stay connected. Special thanks to Eric Cooley for creating our music. And don't forget to check out our Patreon for exclusive content and ways to help us keep the show going. Until next time, Stay curious and keep exploring the unexplained.